Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling, and shall we see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today, where we are pre-stream. I decided that I had time to record the Animal Crossing, so here we are recording it. Yeah, that's about, honestly, that is literally it. I don't know what I'm going to talk about today, to be honest. You know what I can talk about? I can talk about Flowers to Algernon. Seeing as well on the trend for speaking about media I've consumed. I actually completely forgot. I don't think I ever spoke about Flowers for Algernon, but hello everyone. We're now in Fawnhallow. It's 1:38 PM on Sunday, July 6th, 2025. But yeah, so by the way, I'm not like much of a book person. I'm not like a literary person. I have like, I like to think I have some media comprehension, like a base level, but I'm not going to pretend that I read a lot of books and have a lot to sort of compare with Flowers for Algernon. I mean, it was sort of spurned by the fact I was like, I haven't read a book for a really long, like when it came to the new year, I was like, I haven't read a book for a really long time. I should really like try and get back into reading or something. And I think to a certain extent, I did. By the fact I've read a book, and you might be like, you read one book in 6 months, and the answer is yeah, probably. I mean, I don't like most of the times when I have opportunity to read, I don't often read because I feel like the times I would read would be when I'm traveling, but most of the time when I'm traveling, I sleep on the travel journey. At the end of the day, I do prefer my games, but I do like reading as well, I don't think I'm not going to become a bookworm, I don't think, is just sort of my honest analysis of myself. But I think it's still nice to be able to read a book every now and then. So that was spurned by that. So I was like, I will pick a book, and I was like, I'm gonna read like what is a famous, like renowned book, and I'm gonna try and pick one which I'm like seems like an interesting concept to me. And the options I was gonna choose, it was either gonna be 1984 or Flowers for Algernon. And then the only thing I really knew about Flowers for Algernon, it was like some sci-fi sort of thing, where I mean, I guess like I don't even know what counts as mild or like large spoilers anymore because I read it in such a sporadic intervals. So I'm just gonna say pre-warning here that like all bets are off when it comes to spoilers for this book. So mainly because I have a feeling I might accidentally spoil something because I'll forget where in the book it appeared. But it made the shortlist more so because I was just like, oh, it seems interesting. It seems like some sort of sci-fi like lab rat sort of thing. But then I read the synopsis about it, and I was like, whoa, this is actually like seems like it could be a really cool concept. But the core concept, I would say, is basically it starts with Charlie Gordon. I don't know why I said it like Gordon. Charlie Gordon, who has like a learning disability, shall we say, where he is intellectually far below his peers. They use a metric IQ, I suppose, in there, but IQ is just kind of like toss that out the window. We're not using that as a metric, but some conceivable intelligence metric you want to measure on. Charlie Gordon is mentally slower than all of his peers. And then the entire premise of a book is they have this experiment, this sort of like revolutionary new medical procedure which can happen and theoretically would make him really smart. And then they tested it on like lab rats, namely one called Algernon, and it worked. Like Algernon like became really good at passing basically all of the lab rat tests, like running mazes and stuff like that. So they're like, okay, we think this works, let's try this on a human. And they end up choosing Charlie Gordon for whatever reason, mainly because he's just like a nice guy and he actually genuinely wants to try. So they do the procedure and it turns out it works. He becomes super smart and he's like slowly learning all these things, and then he just keeps learning more and more and more and more and more and more and more. Basically he learns so insanely fast that he probably becomes like the smartest person like in the world or something. And there's an interesting juxtaposition because while he literally is the smartest person, it's like so sudden, right? So there's some things which he hasn't learned from like general knowledge stuff, but he knows from like a book knowledge sort of standpoint. And then he does like all the studying and researching, and we'll go on to the themes it explores here more in a bit. But he sort of, let's say, becomes a bit disillusioned. I'm not sure if disillusion's the right word, but starts seeing the world through a different perspective and starts seeing the sort of jaded way starts to become a bit more jaded when he understands now the concept of the way people used to treat him and like his past and his traumas. And then there's a shocking discovery, which is, I'm not sure if this should be said in the plot blurb, but it was on the blurb, at least of my book. But basically, it turns out this thing is not permanent. It's going to fade away eventually. He's going to lose all that intelligence he has, and he's going to go back to where he started, perhaps even lower than where he started. And you see it start to happen in Algernon, where, I can't remember exactly how it goes, but eventually he starts becoming worse at these mazes. And then now it's basically a race against time, where he's like, okay, what can I do with this time I still have? And he does a lot of like his scientific studies. He sort of reconciles and also doesn't reconcile with some of these relationships that he has. And basically the book ends with his sort of descent downwards, as he goes back to being the Charlie Gordon that we saw at the start of the book again, and his sort of frustrations over now knowing what he is losing, essentially. And then the book ends where he gets put back into sort of like a special care home, essentially. And that is the concept which sort of drew me in as an interest, because it's tragic. It's very sad. A sad story, isn't it? It's sad to lose something. It's sad, or it's sad to never have something. I mean, it's even sadder to have it and then know you're going to lose it. And there's a sort of like a tragic irony in his life, I suppose. Did he deserve that fate? No, of course not. But I mean, it's a fate which he is unchangeable, essentially, and it's more to do with the reactions of how he deals with it. Because I think a book is a very interesting thing, where it's basically the first half of it, at least my interpretation of a book. The first half talks a lot and is a very interesting story about people's perceptions and perspectives and treatment of people, and how he sees now that he does not have his like intellectual disability anymore. He can now understand the concepts through the way his peers understand him, and now see that the way he's been mistreated, the way that people have been unfair, unkind and cruel for basically no reason for him, for things out of his control, but yet he shoulders all the blame for it. And he becomes quite sort of frustrated, fairly, at the fact. And it covers quite like a wide range, from like much more literal abuse, I suppose, from his birth mother, to things which are kind of more like, I would say, like microaggressions, or things which are much more sort of subtle in the just, you know, like a disapproving look or something, or like a certain word choice which makes it belittles him, essentially. And then it becomes interesting as well, because as he sort of accelerates upwards, that sort of unshakable image of people, or who he used to be, doesn't change for a lot of people. But now he is smarter than them. He is so much more capable than them. And you can see that the treatment changes, but in a different light now. Now, instead of being one of, I'm putting you down to make me feel better, now it's one of like, I can't do that anymore. Now I'm sort of a jealousy, right? And it's sort of a cruelty of fate for how he has to suffer negative consequences of both, which are almost kind of like out of his control, right? I'm not going to say that he's like a perfect person, because that wouldn't be a very interesting protagonist, but he's certainly like a good person. And yeah, that's like how the first half of the book, I think, sort of like is very interesting to me, because it challenges your own perspectives of things too. Challenges like, I like to think of myself as a good person. I like to think that we all think of ourselves as good people, and I like to think I treat people with kindness to the best of my ability. But I'm sure there are times where I've done something unintentionally, I would hope, and it's been like rude, or it's been something which is deeply offensive in a way which I didn't even realize. And that sort of interesting sort of perspective, because it gives an insight into something which basically I don't think anyone would be able to experience in the real world, but sort of like a sample taste of all sort of different spectrums, I suppose, of human perception, right? And how not only does the literal position of it matter, the absolute value, I suppose, if we were to quantify intelligence, but even the shift between it can make such a huge difference, and how sort of ingrained people's initial concepts of people are, and how these sort of like artificial labels which are put onto people end up sort of sticking far further than the actual actions and heart which is in the person itself. That I find fascinating, very endlessly interesting. And yeah, and then there's sort of like a turning point in the middle of a book where Charlie Gordon, he puts together some things which has been bugging him, and he realizes, wait a minute, I realize now this is not going to last forever. There was a mistake, and it sort of, I will say it does help that this book sort of hand waves a lot of the highly intelligent concepts, I think, because does it make sense? I don't know, I don't think so, but I'm also not a biologist, so not my place to say. And then when that happens, it sort of shifts into a very different perspective as well, where it still has that sort of ongoing feeling of like the perspective changing and shifting, because there's a lot about the sort of pitying gaze that he gets as people now know his fate, and how much he ends up resenting it, which I think is a very fair sort of exploration of human emotion, right? But it becomes a very sort of interesting existential, I think, question, at least how I see it, of like, it's kind of almost like an eldritch horror, but in like a mundane eldritch horror, right? Learning about something which you never even knew existed, and now learning that you will lose it, and you will not understand the concept of losing it, essentially. It's to me, that feels like quite an existential horror sort of thing. And it raises really interesting questions about some, not only appreciation of his sort of value, but more so, to me, it raises a lot of questions with regards to how you can understand things which you don't experience, I suppose. I'm not really sure how to explain it, but the sort of concept of, the not knowing, and now knowing the not knowing, sort of, is a bit weird to say. There's definitely a line in that book which sort of stuck with me, which is towards the end of the book, when he's confronting one of his professors again and sort of expressing all his frustrations with it, where he uses this like elevator or lift analogy, where he said, I can't remember the exact things, I'm paraphrasing, but he says, I passed you on the way up and now I'm passing you on the way down. And I don't know, that line there, or that like section, despite the fact I can't remember the exact words of it, the sort of feelings carried within it really stuck with me as a sort of like doomed tragedy in kind of a way. But then I suppose in equal parts you might say it's not a tragedy. It's not like everything worked out perfectly for him when he was super intelligent. He wanted to get closure from his mother to be like, look, now I'm not the idiot you thought I was. But it's sort of not. His mother has dementia and does not remember him, and can only see him as the child that she spited, essentially, and abused for his entire life. And it's really tragic in that. There is no sense of closure there. And I think what really is interesting is being able to see all the different characters' interactions on the way up and on the way down. The scientist being not intentionally spiteful, but definitely sort of envious in a way, being challenged by, and seeing him more of his own creation. And then on the way down, they start to sort of empathize a bit more as they now understand the situation, I suppose, a bit better. Maybe they have more time to reflect. Maybe you could argue in a more negative light that they're disappointed that their experiment, quote, quote, didn't work out, in a way. I think Alice is also a very interesting character as well. Someone who actually appreciated him a lot, even when... even at the beginning and at the end of his journey, and in fact felt like there was too large a distance between her and when he was like a super genius. That to me was also very interesting as a character. And also like tons of characters, like Faye was a very interesting character, someone that he only basically met like at his peak of his intelligence, and then slowly, as he sort of degrades is kind of like a demeaning word, I didn't mean like that, but as he sort of regresses backwards, how she sort of like loses interest, kind of in that way, mainly because his sort of personality ends up changing in a way, and his own sort of frustrations as things sort of go. It's a fascinating book, I think, and commentary on human condition, shall we say. And honestly, I'm very glad that I read it. I didn't. I think it's a very sad book, and you might be like, if you listen to a lot of my things, you might be like, "Did you cry?" No, I didn't cry, but I was like sad. You know, don't get me wrong. I'm not incapable of feeling emotions. But yeah, I'm not sure what else to say about it. Like, I'm sure there's more like media analysis you can do on it. I feel like probably it wasn't helped by the fact that I didn't super read it consistently. So I'm sure there's a lot of themes that might have like gone over my head, or like I missed something along the way. Apparently it was a short story though to begin with, and then they made it into a full publication. But I think it's fascinating. Really, I think the sort of key takeaway I've taken from it is about the treatment. And I suppose there's an irony in the way I'm going to describe here, treatment of others, or the othering of people, you know? The sort of like alienation, both, you know, intentional, which again, hopefully I don't do, and unintentional, just through like mind's perspectives, you know, how people are raised, how society treats people, how everything is sort of framed. It sort of really made me think about that. And I think that, to be fair, there's another thing which I didn't really talk about, mainly because I don't think I found that as compelling as an interesting thing to talk about. But you know, there is a sort of conflict about, I suppose, how much enjoyment, I suppose, intelligence can really bring. Because I suppose there's this sort of dichotomy of like Charlie Gordon at the beginning and the end of his journey. But he was actually a very, very happy individual, despite despite his intelligence not matching his peers and society and that sort of thing. And as his intelligence increases, he actually becomes a lot more depressed and angry, I suppose, in a way. Because I suppose now he's more aware, I suppose, of injustice. I guess kind of it's literally ignorance is bliss, in a way. So I think there's stuff to be said there. I didn't find that as compelling, to be honest, about the perspective on like treatment and, you know, how, I suppose, stuck in stone people, not stuck in stone, not people are, but perspectives can be, in a way, right? I don't know. Let's see. Flowers for Algernon. Wikipedia. Is there like there's a film apparently? Okay, let's see. Background, publication, short story. Yes, there is a short story. Novel style, epistolary style. Epistolary is also a really cool word. You know, this is completely unrelated. What is the word origin of epistolary? Epistola, Latin for what? For letter, maybe? Letter. Epistolaire. It's French for letter. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, it's told through progress reports as well, which is interesting. So there's like spelling mistakes, there's grammatical mistakes, and things are quite sort of dense and difficult to read at the beginning and the end. And then you can see how the style of writing changes throughout as well, as like his words get more complex and the feelings and thoughts he conveys. It's very interesting, unique way I think to tell a story as well. Themes. Important themes in Flower for Algernon include treatment of the mentally disabled, impact of happiness on the conflict between intelligence and emotion. That's a much more succinct way, I think, of putting it than I did. How events in the past can influence a person later in life. Algernon, an example of a story that incorporates a science fiction theme of uplift. So intervention of the evolution of species of low intelligence or non-sapient species in order to increase intelligence. Wow, there's so many different interpretations of it. Episode of a TV series, Homer. Is this the one where he gets like the crayon unstuck in his brain, right? I mean, you can see the cultural impacts it has and how many different adaptations there are. It almost seems like I wouldn't be surprised if this is like one of the tropes that every long-running TV series has to do. Like everyone always does like a Wizard of Oz style story. Everyone does. I don't know. I need to think of another one off the top of my head, but it's really hard. A Wizard of Oz style story. Everyone always does like a I don't know, it's really hard to think of one off the top of my head, but like these standard story structures which always appear in like at least one-off episode or something. Anyway, that's what I have to really say. Flowers of Algernon, good book, definitely give it a read. And yeah, so I'm gonna round this episode off here, and I'm gonna go immediately into streaming. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares greatly appreciated. Social Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now it's our farewell. So until next time, bye bye for now.